ほら、ルフィ、今一緒に海賊になる仲間を探してるんだ。
Hello guys, welcome to my channel The Wandering Zoro, your go-to destination for anime-related content. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. In today's video, we're going to be diving into part 2 of the series What If Izuku Became the Batman of the MHA verse. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. It was terrible in Shinso's opinion. He was in charge of quite a few people as a police detective in this exam and he absolutely hated it. He was used to not sleeping, but not sleeping due to paperwork and trying to piece together evidence in crimes was not his thing. The only good side to this was that he could join the hero course if he did well. So even as he walked into Mayor Conroy's home where the man himself had died, he couldn't help but think of what if this was all real, what if he as an underground hero was here investigating. It wasn't pretty. The body was realistic and had what he could only guess was pig's vital fluid covering the body to make it feel more real. Upon seeing the body, Shinso's partner commented, "What sort of sicko does something like this?" The short-haired girl with red hair looked up to Shinso as he replied to the inquiry, "A psychopath with an agenda." Shinso inspected the tapped head of the body with the words "No more lies," and upon looking around the room he noticed many photos of the mayor's past achievements with similarly written defaming words. The tapped-up face of the mayor and the words painted on. Sighing, Shinso decided he needed to get some air before getting into all this. He addressed his partner Kiori and walked up the stairs and through the roof access door. Standing in the rain wasn't healthy, but the purple-haired teen playing detective didn't care. He just stood taking sips of his coffee while thinking the situation over. That was until a sound from behind him alerted him to someone's presence. His head shot to the figure and Shinso was surprised. Batman? The tall, intimidating figure of the city's vigilante looked over Shinso, and then he spoke in a dead serious tone. "Detective Shinso, we need to talk. Kinda like this, but with the suit form the Batman instead." Shinso gulped, unsure how to respond, but did so anyway. "What is it you need of me?" Batman stepped off the roof and right in front of Shinso. He then stood up and answered, "I need to get inside and inspect the mayor. If this is what I believe it to be, then this is the first main event to this exam." The rain continued to pelt the two and Shinso thought it over in his head. The mayor's death so close to the end of the election was suspicious already, but how he died made it all the more clear that this Batman was right. With a sigh, Shinso nodded, "Fine, but no funny business, and tell me everything you find while in there. As long as no one attacks me, I will stay passive. Now tell me what you know," the Batman ordered. Sighing again, Shinso did just that as they entered the building and headed down towards the body. The cops inside froze at seeing the vigilante and were completely off guard as Shinso explained the situation to said vigilante. One officer tried to stop them, but with an order from Shinso the officer stepped back and let them enter the main room where the mayor laid. Almost immediately Izuku aka the Batman noticed the tap, the wording, and the graffiti all over the pictures. Humming in thought, Izuku took out his hacking tool and used the camera to take pictures of the wall of the mayor's achievements and the mayor himself. It was also then that one of the other detectives called out to Shinso. This was his partner Kiori, who had a letter grasped in her gloved hands. "So we got something." Shinso turned along with Izuku, who stared at the letter. On the letter in bold was "To the Batman" written on it. "What the letter has written in it? Does this mean anything to you, Batman?" Shinso asked inquisitively. But Izuku didn't ask her and instead took the letter that was handed out to him. He used a batarang to open it and read the contents aloud. "Who I am is the question, what you do matters most. But that is not the matter at hand. You will find me with my thumb of knowledge, so seek me out you must. Let's play a game, you and I, for this city will be drowned in chaos. You may call me the Riddler, for you my friend are on your path to find me. My first riddle is this: what does a liar do when dead?" Underneath these words were symbols used when the riddle was solved. Izuku looked up to the quiet room and spotted Shinso deep in thought. Shinso looked up to the vigilante and asked, "What does a liar do when dead? What kind of nonsense is this?" Izuku and Kiyomi didn't respond as another voice answered instead, "That's what I'm wondering, Detective Shinso. What the hell is a vigilante doing in my crime scene?" Everyone turned to the main entrance where the commissioner was standing with a small group of heroes behind him, who when seeing Batman went wide-eyed. The group consisted of Momo, Ida, Uraraka, and Mina. Izuku looked at them, assessing them for danger to himself, and formed a plan of attack and retreat. But this was not needed, as Shinso spoke up his here to help and was addressed directly by the maniac who did this. "So sorry, Commissioner, but this is high priority as of now." The Commissioner glared and was about to yell once again, but was stopped by Momo. "Sir, stop this nonsense and let us get to work. If the Batman needs to be here, then so be it." The room was surprised to hear this, but did as the female heroine ordered. Even the Commissioner begrudgingly accepted the order but continued to glare at the vigilante, playing his part as a strict police commissioner well. Momo with trepidation walked to Shinso and Batman, greeting the two. "Greetings, Detective and Batman, it's an honor to meet you." Izuku didn't respond, even though it hurt him to ignore his crush like this, but acting detached to not make the connection between himself and the Batman was needed here. The Ravenette frowned at not getting a response, but this didn't deter her any bit as she addressed Shinso. "Detective, what's the situation?" The purple-haired teen sighed and went over the details, from the body of the mayor to how he met Batman on the roof and his idea on this being the first of Nezu's obstacles to capture these mystery killer. Momo and the other heroes agreed to this, and Ida looked over the letter with Momo after it was handed to them by Izuku, Ida mimicking the letter word by word. "So this Riddler character wants us to find him by using riddles he leaves behind. I can see this getting out of hand sooner rather than later," Momo commented. She then looked to the body and noticed the hand of the mayor. "His thumb has been cut off. Do we think he was tortured before he was killed?" "No." The group turned to Batman, who was deciphering the letter. "No, he wasn't tortured. The way the cut was made and how the hand was found shows signs of rigor mortis before the thumb was cut off. In other words, the digit was removed well after he had died. The handprints in the neck show he was strangled to death, but the wound on the back of his head also show signs of a tool being used to knock him to the ground. The drag marks on the floor indicate this as well." "I see, then the riddle?" asked Momo, who was increasingly intrigued by the masked man. "The answer is he lies still," answered the Batman. The group nodded along to this, and Uravity aka Uraraka asked, "So the symbols go to the letters in the answer. What do we get after that then?" Izuku hummed and his mind raced. "It goes into this word scramble at the bottom of the letter. I've been decoding it while you all talked. What it says is this. This man lived and lied day after day, putting tax dollars into his prized possessions. Leaving the poor and hungry to fight, this monster would drive by." The heroes and detectives rubbed their chins at this, unsure what it meant. Once again Batman was asked to hit it all meant, and this time it was Shinso who did so. "Got any idea what that could mean?" "Because I got nothing," the purple-haired detective said with a tired sigh. Izuku nodded and used his gauntlet computer to access the mayor's listed owned properties, and after a few minutes of digging he found what he needed. Turning and walking towards the front door, Izuku brushed past the group and surrounding cops. This however caused Momo to shout, "Wait, where are you going?" Izuku stopped but didn't turn around to address the young woman. The mayor owned a garage nearby where he kept his expensive vehicles he bought using the city's tax money. "That's where we'll find our next clue." With another tap of his gauntlet, the Batmobile came roaring down the street and stopping feet away from the armored man, and he swiftly opened the door and entered. This however was enough time for Momo and Uraraka to get to the car and open it, making Izuku turn and raise an eyebrow at their action as they both piled in, Momo sitting the seat with Uraraka sitting on her lap. "Care to explain what you're doing?" Izuku asked. Momo and Uraraka turned to him and the Ravenette replied, "We're coming with you of course, and we need to keep an eye on you." Izuku sat staring at them for a few moments until he caved. "Fine, but don't touch anything and just know any tracker you plant in here will be found and destroyed before you can track me." The tall woman pouted at this and lifted her hand with a tracker device in it and pocketed it in her suit. "Fine, but we will find out who you are, Batman, one way or another." The armored bat didn't respond to this and instead pushed on the gas, making the car fly down the road and towards the garage. A little bit behind them was Mina, Ida, Shinso, and Kiori. The male hero of the group asked the police duo, "Do either of you have a car?" They both shook their heads and had to flag down another officer with a car who could take them to where Batman was heading with the girls. Time skip. The Batmobile screeched to a halt in front of the elevator leading down into the garage of the mayor. The three exited the armored muscle car and walked to the elevator. Izuku inspected the elevator to see an electronic keypad lock. Not seeing it as much of a problem, he took out his hacking device again and started hacking into it. It was while he was hacking that Mina, Ida, Shinso, and Kiori had caught up and were brought up to speed on the situation. "So this is the place, right?" asked Kiori. Shinso nodded as he typed away at his phone. "That's what I found in our database, and it fits with what Batman has claimed." The elevator keypad dinged and it changed to a green color as the door shifted and peeled back to let them enter. Izuku stood up from his spot and entered the elevator with the others joining him. The door closed behind them and Izuku pushed the button to the bottom level. The elevator shook, causing Momo to fall into Izuku, who caught her. "Are you all right?" he asked. Momo blushed and nodded, feeling oddly warm under her collar and a sense of familiarity with the man's hands around her. But before she could ponder this more, the elevator door opened again to show the garage. It was filled with classic and high-end cars. Izuku walked ahead of the group, looking between the cars with the others inspecting them each more closely. Near the end of the cars, Izuku stopped and walked to the car in front of him. Shinso had noted this and waved the others to join him. They all walked over to the Batman and saw him open the door and inspect the inside. "What are you doing? Why are you searching his car in particular?" Uraraka asked, confused by the vigilante's actions. Batman stopped for a moment and turned to face the girl before pointing to the back tire there. "That's the tool used to remove the mayor's finger." Glancing at where he pointed, they all saw gardening shears with vital fluid on the blades stabbed into the tire, the air ever so slowly leaking from it. Nice deduction," commented Mina, who was unsure of how to feel about the whole situation. Izuku didn't respond as he went back to looking inside the car. When he made it to the armrest glove box, he found what he was looking for. Lifting his hand with the item, he narrowed his eyes and turned to show the group a thumb drive. Mina rolled her eyes. "Is this guy some sorta jokester of something?" Ida gasped at hearing this. "Ashido-san, this is serious business. Our exam is important and we must treat it seriously. First of all, you're supposed to calm me by my hero name while on duty, and second of all, come on, it's a thumb drive for crying out loud." Momo and Uraraka sighed at the two fighting over being serious right now, and they both turned to see the Batman plugging the drive into a computer given to him by Shinso. Typing into the computer to access the drive caused the screen to turn black and green. It appeared to be an old-school chat room of some sort with a question written on it. "Did you like my first riddle, Batman?" Izuku glared and typed in a response, "No. Too bad, because we have a few more before we're done. Now, the second riddle is this: I inspire hope and faith. The flood washed away our sins, my body cracked and broken. It is my word against yours, but who will the people believe when the second Genesis arrives?" The group, including Izuku, were lost on this. It was too vague to be answered just yet. And it appeared this was on purpose, as the computer screen showed a time that was slowly ticking down. They had 24 hours to answer the question. Izuku continued to glare at the screen before he stepped back and walked back towards the elevator. Shinso called out to him, "Hey, where are you going now?" Without stopping this time, Izuku got into the elevator and replied as he pushed the button, "I have another thing to look into tonight. We have 24 hours to find the right answer, but we can't just focus on this. Heroes multitask all the time. This is your test, not mine." The elevator closed, leaving a group to ponder the vigilante's words, and they found it to be right. This was the reality of the hero world. Even when in an important investigation, they still needed to patrol and investigate other cases. This just left them with one thought, however: who is the Batman? And how do they react to him? Do they ask for his help? Or do they try and apprehend him? For their sake, they better decide on this sooner rather than later. A little while later. The rain pattered at the windows, but the sound of rain falling was overshadowed by the beat of the music inside the club. Up in the office of the owner sat a young man with makeup and prosthetics, was sitting at his desk doing paperwork when two men came inside his office. "What he looks like with the prosthetics." Looking up from his work, the young man portraying a much older man spoke, using his acting skills to sound somewhat British. "What is it you lot want?" The taller of the two who came in shoved the smaller one to the ground. "This one decided it was a good idea to put lemonade in the fruit punch bowl when we clearly have them both labeled separately." The man on the floor squeaked, "I didn't know." Sitting in the chair was the main boss of the nightclub and nicknamed the Penguin. He was ruthless, cunning, and able to make deals with the worst of the worst. "Take him to the ice room." The penguin said coldly while looking at the man strewn about the floor. No, no. Not the ice room. The man pleaded, but his pleas went unheard. The taller man from before picked the other man up and dragged him out of the room kicking and screaming, leaving the penguin to his work. The ice room is just a very cold room where they keep the ice, and those sentences to work in there have to break the ice used for the club's drinks. It's awfully boring and hurts your hands from breaking so much ice for long periods of time. Again, this is a test, so the villains can't actually hurt anyone, so fun little punishments are always welcome. The penguin sighed and resumed doing his paperwork, but was once again interrupted when the phone on his desk started ringing. Quirking an eyebrow, the penguin reached over and answered hello. On the other side came a crazed voice. "Oh penguin, it's your old friend Scarecrow. Those chemicals you promised me were intercepted by the city's vigilante, so if you'd be so kind to get me more like our partner has instructed, I would be ever so grateful." The penguin frowned but answered, "Fine, but you better do your part of the bargain, Crane, or I'll tell the boss man all about you not working according to the plan." Crane, or also known as Scarecrow, laughed at this. "That won't be a problem, my friend. After all, we all gain from this deal of ours. Send the new shipment directly to my lab. I don't have enough chemicals yet for our plan to work just yet, so I need them delivered as fast as possible, even if it's a bit risky." Penguin grunted at this. "All right, I'll send it all to your little chemistry plant so it'll be there later tonight." Clapping could be heard as Scarecrow smiled on the other side. "Goody, I can't wait to make my toxin and spread panic and fear. Talk to you another time, Penguin." With that, Scarecrow hung up, leaving the club owner and secret mob boss to facepalm. "I just had to sign up for this, and I have to do freaking paperwork too? Why'd I think this was a good idea? Whatever, this paperwork won't do itself, I suppose." The crime boss focused back on his work, unknowing of the multiple figures listening in on him and his colleagues' conversation. One of those listening was the Recon team from the heroes, which consisted of Setsuna, Toru, Kyoka, and Tokoyami. The other was the Batman, who had sent his bat into the air vents to record the criminal's entire conversation, while the Batman himself was across the street, perched atop a building with rain pelting his form. If I'm being honest, I just wanna use some of the cool Batman art I've saved up from looking for reference images to use in stories. Izuku noticed the hero team doing their recon a little ways away from him and sighed at how obvious they were. Even Toru and Setsuna, who should have been good at spying, were terrible at being discreet and were just barely going unnoticed by the people around them. Sighing, Izuku shook his head and tapped his earpiece under his cowl to replay the recording. "All right, I'll send it all to your little chemistry plant so it'll be there later tonight." Humming, Izuku used his gauntlet to display the map of Gotham and ran the Bat computer for references to chemical plants old and new in the Gotham database, and after cross-referencing out the new and highly populated chemical plants, he found what he was looking for. Ace Chemicals. It was shut down a few years ago due to a chemical spill that killed 8 workers. Since then it's been abandoned. Just the right kind of place for a criminal to hide in and make all sorts of bioweapons. Izuku commented gravely. He put the coordinates to the chemical plant in his gauntlet and was about to head off, but was stopped in his tracks. A voice came from his side and he turned to it. "So, you're the Batman? You're definitely tall, dark and broody, but why don't you let me see that face of yours so I can see if I need to add handsome to that list," said the floating head of Setsuna Tokuge, also known as Lizardy. Izuku didn't answer, knowing if he did, Kyoka, who was most likely listening, would piece together who he was, but it seemed this was a bad choice as Setsuna grinned. "So, you want it the hard way then? I don't mind, I love a man who plays hard to get," said Setsuna. From behind him, Izuku heard a few steps and he jumped to the side to dodge Dark Shadow. He then had to sidestep a punch from Toru, who almost slipped on the wet ground of the roof. Izuku could tell he was in trouble but didn't let it show. As he scanned the roof, he saw Toru, Tokoyami, Setsuna's head but not her body or Kyoka. So with retreat in mind, he grabbed a smoke pellet and threw it at his feet. The smoke cloud enveloped him almost immediately. A wave of sound came and dispersed the smoke, but by then Izuku had disappeared completely, not only shocking the group but causing Kyoka to shout out, "What the hell? Why didn't I hear where he went in the smoke?" The group of heroes scanned the area, Sentuna's body floating over time her head as she reassembled herself. "I don't know. Do you think it's his quirk?" "Maybe, it wouldn't surprise me if it was," said Toru, who walked over towards Kyoka. Dark Shadow went back to Tokoyami and looked around. "That guy is like us, one with the darkness." A true dweller of the abyss. The avian-head young man nodded to his quirk's words revelry in the dark. Off about 100 feet away from the group stood the Batman, who was hidden in the shadows with his breathing quieted and his heartbeat slowed down to go unnoticed. His eyes stared at Kyoka and he smiled. She and the others did well in that surprise attack, but they need to be better to catch me. He took a step back further in the shadows, disappearing form there and heading to his car a few more streets down. He had a chemical plant to find, and if he was lucky he'd get there before the heroes pieced it all together. The rain continued to pour as the Scarecrow was in his lab and donning his mask, which was heavily torn and stitched back together. He was working while humming a creepy melody to himself. One of his hand was dunked in barrel of chemicals as he absorbed them to make his toxin, the raw materials being absorbed becoming building blocks for him to craft whatever he wished with. This is what the Scarecrow looks like. I like this look and think it goes well with the story. While his other hand was in a separate barrel that was completely empty but was getting filled by the sickly green liquid that seeped through and out, this was how he made his fear toxin. By absorbing these raw chemicals he got from the penguin, he got to work make his hallucinogenic toxin that induced very vivid nightmares that showed his victims their worst nightmare come to life with no way of knowing it wasn't real. Almost done, and I must say these chemicals are all top-notch. I should give Penguin a picnic basket for doing such a good job in supplying me with good materials. He poured the rest of the fear toxin into the barrel, leaving the other barrel now completely empty spare for a few drops, and with his work now finished, Scarecrow put a lid on the newly filled barrel to start moving it down with the others. That was until he abruptly heard metal creaking. Turning and gazing at the dilapidated roof of the chemical plant, he shouted out to his goons, "Hey, keep it down you imbeciles, I'm trying to work here." But to his displeasure he didn't get a response, causing him to glare and start stomping towards the door leading out of the mixing room and out into the center area. What the chemical plant is like. Looking throughout the building. Scarecrow didn't see a soul in sight, but the hair on the back of his neck started to raise up, feeling the sense of something watching him which disputed his observation of the area. I see now, you all want to play a game. Well, I'll find you soon enough and then we can get our work done. Scarecrow said while adjusting the vapor emitter on his right hand just in case it was the heroes and not his guys messing around. He walked past a few barrels filled with his toxin and started tapping on one. "Are you in there?" "Oh, who am I kidding? You'd be dead from fear if you were. Now why don't you come out and..." He was grabbed mid-sentence, making him scream as he was dragged up into the air and held in front of a gargoyle near the ceiling. Without looking at his abductor, Scarecrow shot his gas into the face of the now revealed Batman, who didn't seem to react at all. And this was answered as when he looked closer through the green gas, he saw the lower part of the Batman's face being covered by a sort of rebreather. Cursing his luck, Scarecrow started to monologue, "Now that's not fun at all, so you're the Bat. I must appreciate your intimidating look. From one who loves to make others fear you to another, I must commend your work. Izuku's rebreather. This is sorta what it looks like. The Riddler, where are they and what is your part in their plan?" ordered the Batman with his voice coming out slightly muffled from his gas mask. Scarecrow scoffed at, "This is that all you came to me for? I'm hurt, truly. Here I thought you sought me out for my technique on making others fear and instead I got an emo hero wannabe. How disappointing." Izuku's anger flared up but he channeled it into action, looking at the barrel's bellow, then to the vapor device on his hand, and the mask having a gas filter made him think of an idea. His hand came up and ripped the mask from the villain, causing him to shout, "Hey, I liked that mask. Let's see how you talk after getting a taste of your own medicine," said Izuku with his eyes narrowed. Pressing on the glove caused the gas to blow into Scarecrow's unmasked face, making him cough and quickly start to hallucinate. His heart started pounding as his ears rang, sweat started to form on his brow. Looking up at the thing holding him, he saw a beast that must have came from a horrible nightmare, and in a voice full of anger, full of rage, the monstrous beast spoke, "Where is the Riddler? What is he planning?" This is the best interpretation of a scary Batman I could find. It's from Arkham Origins, which is one of my favorite of the Arkham games. Screaming was the only response the monster got, but after squeezing on the Scarecrow's neck and releasing a few seconds later, the villain started to spill his knowledge. "The guy hasn't told me where he is, but I was supposed to send him some of my fear toxin by tomorrow." Pulling him close in front of him, the monster glared harshly with his glowing eyes. "Swear to me." "I swear. Cammy, I swear I'm telling the truth, so please let me go," cried out the now broken villain. Izuku continued to glare into his eyes a few more seconds until he dropped the man, letting him fall. The villain screamed in fright the entire way until he stopped just feet before the ground, having got to the end of the rope he had been attached to and left to hang there. The villain had gone unconscious from fright and left to dangle from the rope attached to him with a visible wet spot in between his legs. Izuku, who was still on the gargoyle, tapped his earpiece and contacted his AI. "Alfred, send officers to the Ace Chemicals building and make sure they have medical with them," said the emotionless-sounding vigilante. Without waiting for a response, he walked past unconscious thug androids and exited the building after getting the villain down and to the floor safely. Even if this was supposed to be realistic, Izuku wouldn't feel right leaving someone to dangle from a rope for a long period of time, and he was in no good state of mind to be doing something like that right now. The sound of rain and his own footsteps as he walked to the car was almost deafening. He was left with the actions he had chosen to do, with the consequences that he himself is to blame for. He may have just traumatized a kid from his school, and for what? His own misplaced sense of justice. But then what is justice really? What makes him different from those who seek chaos to show how unjust the world is? Is the only difference between him and a villain that he is attending UAL and they didn't? These questions were clouding his mind, and he didn't notice how he had drove to the Batcave. It was barely 12:30 and here he was at his base with plenty of time to go out and patrol. Yet even Izuku could tell he wasn't in the best mindset and would be foolish to go out with such a preoccupied mind. He would need to clear his head somehow before even thinking about heading out again. So he did what he usually did when his mind was heavy with thoughts. He called up the only person he could think that could help him now, and this was none other than his mom, Inko Midoriya. Ring ring beep, hello? Izuku, do you know what time it is? Shouldn't you be at school right now? Are you okay, sweetie? Do you need me to come get you or something? Izuku smiled with his cowl still on, his fingers locked together. I'm here, Mom, and I'm doing good. I just thought I just needed to talk is all. Sorry for waking you. Don't be, dear. I'm always here for you. So what's got you so worked up? Came Inko's reassuring bit, still evidently tired voice. I did something and I'm regretting it, but I also know that I probably need to do it again with the path I've chosen to follow. Izuku came clean to his mom, wanting to hear her thoughts on the matter. Inko paused for a bit to think over her words. Izuku, tell me this. Did you do what you had to do for the good of others? Izuku thought his mother's question over in his head and nodded to himself in a way. I did, yes, but what does that have to do with? He was cut off by his mom. Young man, your idol used violence to stop other violence for his entire career. If anything you did was on the same level as breaking a man's bones in one punch, then you're fine in your idol's eyes and in my eyes as well. Don't make it complicated, Izuku. Just do what you think is right, and I know as usually it'll be the right thing to do since you've always done good for others even without thinking. Izuku felt the edges of his lips lift up into a smile, and he shook his head to what she just said. Mothers really do know what to always say in times like these. Thanks, Mom, I'll let you go back to sleep. Good night. Good night, Izuku. Stay safe and have a good night. Inko hung up shortly after leaving Izuku with a newly cleared head. The young man turned to the Bat computer and spoke to his AI. Alfred, send Bat to spy on the heroes and tell me if they need help with the riddle. Aye, sir. Bat is on its way as per you've orders. Nodding, Izuku looked through crime reports and headed to the nearest crime scene in the Batmobile, and he'd continue to work throughout the night. In the observation room, Toshinori sighed in relief and let the unease he previously had from watching his protégé go completely. He and the others had gotten worried with how Izuku had done with the Scarecrow. He could still hear Chiyo yelling at Nezu for allowing such substances to be allowed in a testing environment, and that it was an especially stupid idea with how easily it backfired on the poor boy. But Nezu countered, as usual, that it was all to make the exam feel more real, and the young man in question signed papers acknowledging that this may happen during the exercise. Toshinori frowned at that, but not for any of the reasons Chiyo was talking about. No, Toshinori was worried at how his successor had interrogated someone for information. Toshi knew he didn't teach him that, and as cold as Aizawa was, even he wouldn't teach how to interrogate to kids just out of middle school. This made Toshinori ponder on if this was the hero Izuku wanted to be, one of fear and intimidation that just hearing about him would make villains scurry like rats. Of course it would be hypocritical to think that way, as his position as the former #1 hero made quite the splash when it came to suppressing crime, He saw this daily in the numbers while reading reports. Those areas All Might would patrol would see lowered crime rates. It was a known fact that criminals were intimidated by him, but Izuku wanted something more, something he couldn't quite describe just yet. Toshi, are you listening to me? Called out Gran Torino with a tick mark on his forehead. Snapping out of his stupor, the retired hero turned to his sensei and replied, "Sorry sir, what were you asking?" Gran scoffed at him. "I wanted to tell you that you shouldn't worry too much about the kid. He's doing well, and if you've forgotten, he's playing a vigilante, so laws don't really apply to him. So interrogating some lowlife is right up his alley. Hell, if he held back any more, I'd have to complain that Nezu should dock his points." "Excuse me? What do you mean by that, sir?" Shaking his head in disbelief, Gran pointed to a replay of the interrogation. "Just look and you can see the kid thought about dropping him right into those barrels filled with that stuff below them. The drop wasn't far enough to break anything, but the kid was worried about the amount of chemicals that would affect the other kid. So I'd say he held back greatly and thought through it all like a professional would, although I personally would have smacked the guy around a bit, but that's just my opinion." He was right, absolutely right. How could he have been so blind? Young Midoriya did everything to his advantage and still didn't go too far in crossing the line. Looking at it this way, Toshi could see the calculating look his successor had when in hero mode, as he called it. He was in complete control of the situation, and when he thought he had been too rough, he exited his patrol to go and clear his head. Oh, how much of a fool could he be? Toshinori needed to have more faith in his successor and not crumble at the first sign of something going wrong. He promised Midoriya he'd have faith in him, and he already failed. But no more. From here on, Toshinori Yagi will back his student all the way, even when he is against the wall. Even if Midoriya himself feels lost, he'd continue to have faith in him. "You're right, sir. Thanks for pointing this out to me," Toshinori replied with a smile and calmness in his tone of voice. Rolling his eyes, the older hero looked to the screen of the boy finishing his talk with his mother and leaving the secret base. "Don't mention it. Besides, I've seen you go down the path of righteousness too, no. And I won't ever stop bringing it up, so don't even try stopping me." Twitching, the blonde man's eyes closed shut harshly as memories came up his mind. "I remember, sir, and I still regret going vigilante to try and avenge Nana's memory." There was a long stretch of silence until Gran Torino responded, "Whatever, brat, let's just get back to watching the kid before that rabbit woman starts trying to barge out of here and hop your successor again." Sweat dropping at this, Toshinori glanced over to the newly named HNY jail corner where Mako and Midnight had been tied up and gagged. Apparently his successor being intimating had turned them on. He wasn't one to judge, but he started wondering if there was something wrong with those women. "Yeah, I think my successor is going to be in the hospital with a fractured pelvis by the end of this." "Probably. But hey, who would complain about getting injured in such a way?" "Yeah, no, you're not exactly wrong." With the heroes in Hero HQ. Kendo rubbed her temples as the daytime heroes have come back and were getting ready to rest and had just finished the basic debriefing for the day, and now before the night team, who would be patrolling from 12:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. were seated. All right, I've heard enough. Can we please get over the fact that this Batman character can teleport and or become one with the darkness like you all keep saying? Revelry in the dark. Kendo facepalmed from Tokoyam's last little jab and spoke while pinching the bridge of her nose. "I'm going to ignore that and move on to the next matter of business." She turned to the laptop with the Riddler's new riddle on it. "This Riddler character seems to be what appears to be Nezu's made-up main opponent for us. It also seems fitting actually that the smartest creature alive would have our test be against someone who will challenge our knowledge and thinking capacity." The occupants of the room nodded to this, thinking that the rat god would definitely pull something like this. Even the more brash like Bakugu, Monoma, and Kamakiri couldn't dispute this. Kendo then turned to the Recon team. "I know you guys encountered the Batman a little after the mayor's incident, but I want to hear from the first group to encounter him if that's alright." Kyoka, Setsuna, Toru, and Tokoyami raised no objections to this, allowing Kendo to question Momo's group. "Kriati, tell me about what happened when you arrived on scene, and don't forget a single detail. Even the smallest can help us in finding the Riddler and or figuring out who this Batman is," ordered the leader. Momo stood up from her seat while tapping on her iPad to switch slides on the large TV in the room. She then went on to explain the mayor's home with detailed images to get her points across. After a bit more of telling her story, she got to the Batman and his actions in the investigation, from his insight and deductions to his finding of the newest riddle. Once Momo was finished, she sat down, allowing everyone to digest the report and form their own ideas on the Riddler and the ever-mysterious Batman. Kendo, being the leader, had much more in her head at hearing all of this. This Batman guy has helped us out a lot. It may have taken us hours to get to that garage, and even longer if he didn't figure out the clue leading to the garage for us so quickly, thought the red-haired leader. Looking up to the others, Kendo saw that they were all waiting on her, so with a deep breath she spoke. Batman has been a major help to us, but he's right. This is our exam, so we can't use him as a crutch. So for those staying back to be backup, we will be deciphering the newest riddle. They all nodded, agreeing to this as the best course of action, but Kendo wasn't done as she turned her attention back to the Recon team. Setsuna, what happened with your group? The green-haired girl stayed sitting and sighed. Well, to put it simply, a guy nicknamed Penguin is the owner of the nightclub we looked into and is in cahoots with some other guy calling himself Scarecrow. He's sending this Scarecrow guy chemicals to making something for someone else who is probably the Riddler by the sounds of it. Kendo nodded to this and added the Riddler, Scarecrow, and Penguin to the board with the Gotham City map. She then turned back to the girl and asked her to continue, which she did. Earphone Jack used her jacks to listen in and send the audio of their talk to a recorder, so we have evidence of the two's dealings and can make a case against them. But that's not all. Invisible Girl was able to put a tracker on the truck sending the chemicals to Scarecrow's hideout, meaning we can go and bust him too while we're at it. Smiling at this good news, the leader of the hero students nodded. Good work, you guys. We can send the raid group in tonight once we catalog the evidence and get a warrant. Now how about your experience with the Batman? What was he like? Setsuna rubbed the back of her head sheepishly, which was very unlike the girl Kendo had gotten to know for the past year. Well, Jax noticed him and I confronted him, even flirted a little to catch him off guard, but it didn't work. It seemed to me like he was spying on the Penguin as well and got a recording from what Jax heard from inside his headpiece. Other than that, we tried to apprehend him, but he disappeared in smoke like we said earlier. Now that was news to everyone. Setsuna and her group had been claiming Batman could disappear out of nowhere when they arrived, but didn't get to elaborate as they had to immediately go and start the meeting. But with this new information they all started to ponder things, one of which was how skilled the Batman truly was, and to a certain raven-haired beauty she remembered the way his arms felt familiar around her and was wondering if she knew him somehow. The silence of the room dragged in until it was broken by Ibarra of Class 1B. I'm sorry to say, but I believe I have some bad news. The others turned to her as they saw the vine-haired girl on her phone. With a few taps, Momo's iPad dinged and the heiress quickly tapped on it and switched the TV to show what Ibarra sent her. It was the live feed from the Gotham City News channel. What they all saw on screen was a seemingly abandoned Ace Chemicals building with police coming out of the front doors with men in handcuffs. Tsuyu tilted her head at this. What's so important about this, Ibarra-chan? Ibarra didn't answer, however, as she let the news anchor explain. A man with brown hair and glasses addressed the camera, speaking to the viewers. This is Jack Ryder here with Gotham News Channel. What is happening behind me is an active crime scene, but the most disturbing news is what dwells inside said building. Inside dwelled a villain who was making a bioweapon here inside our city. He was found by police after a mystery caller sent them here just under half an hour ago. The group's eyes widened as the police escorted a man lying on an ambulance stretcher. But what caught their eye was the outfit of the man. Clad in makeshift clothes and a brown trench coat was the man, but the most disturbing was the scarecrow-like mask and hat he had in accompanying him, which was held by a police officer. Oh no, baskets! Pony cursed in surprise. Without looking over, Uraraka replied, you can say that again. Oh no, baskets! Pony repeated. Jack Ryder spoke as Scarecrow was loaded into an ambulance. The strangest part of this whole thing is the fact police found these criminals already subdued but with no hero in sight. However, when talking to pedestrians we found that they reported a shadowy creature entering and exiting the building. Could this be the rumored Batman we've heard about in the past months? Or does Gotham have a vampiric uprising in its midst? This is Jack Ryder signing off. Is he a vampire? Asked Denki Kaminari, completely serious. Yet no one answered or could say otherwise, so Kaminari from then on started to believe this to be the case. With the meeting basically over, the night patrol team was sent out while the daytime patrol team turned in for the night, which allowed the newly formed investigation team to work on the riddle and start setting up a raid on the Penguin soon. The morning was rough for the hero team. Not only was the riddle still not solved, but their plans to take Penguin down were delayed due to the new mayor having them send teams to the funeral of the old Mayor Conroy. Kendo had been pissed but accepted after the mayor said she had jurisdiction over them and if they wanted to work in her city then they needed to listen to her. So with a pissed-off expression the carrot top teen hung up and addressed the other hero students. Okay, our plan to raid Penguin will be delayed to later this evening. I want those who wish to volunteer for the mayor's funeral to step forward now so I can send you in a couple hours while the rest head out to patrol. A few said they wanted to patrol while some others stepped up. Of those who stepped up they were small in number but enough for the funeral in case any happened or crimes were nearby. So it was decided the ones to attend the funeral were Tsuyu, Tetsu, Kirishima, Shishida, Kodai, Bakugu and Komori. Leaving the others to patrol for the day, but they weren't able to begin just yet as Kendo's phone rang once more, this time from the police station. The redhead sighed and answered quickly, wanting to get the day started already. Yes, this is Battle Fist speaking. Shinso's voice came from the other side. Yo, it's Detective Shinso, we got a problem. Kendo groaned inwardly before saying, hold on a minute, I'll put you on speaker. Shinso gave a simple sure thing, letting Kendo tap the speaker button, allowing the rest to hear what he had to say. Kendo spoke again, letting him know they could hear him, allowing the purple-haired teen to tell them what was going on. We got a major problem. The district attorney Adam West didn't return home last night and neither did Police Commissioner Lub, explained the tired teen. Cursing, Kendo addressed the situation. Do you know if it was a kidnapping or a murder? The sound of Shinso sighing could be heard as he responded, no, it's like they just up and disappeared and we can't track their phones or vehicles. The way things are looking they may have gotten nabbed by someone smart enough to not get tracked. Sitting at her part of the table, Kendo rested her face in her hands as she started thinking. Meanwhile the rest of the two classes present started murmuring to each other on what might have happened. It was a few minutes of this until Kendo came to a decision. Shinso, I want some officers to check their homes for any clues. If anything is out of place I want to know about it. I then want you to get someone to take care of directing the police while you go and watch over the mayor's funeral in a couple hours. Can I trust you to do this? Sure, I'll get some coffee and be right as rain. CYA guys later, answered Shinso before hanging up. Kendo pocketed her phone and turned to the funeral team. You guys rest for now and draw up a plan to have all of the entryways covered and two of you watching over the crowd. And for God's sake act professional and don't get into any trouble with the people who will be at the funeral. Last thing I need is a rich pretty boy nagging to the media about one of you blowing up a mourning family member. Bakugu scoffed at hearing this and turned away at the glare he received from the redhead. Kendo had enough on her plate as the leader, and if the media started to get on there, but she'd personally whoop the butt of whoever caused her more trouble. The meeting went as normal after that, allowing the patrolling teams to leave and the backup teams to rest with those who would be bodyguards for the funeral. Time seemed to fly after that, with Kendo getting informed that nothing was found at either the commissioner's home or the district attorney's. As much as this irked her, she had to let the matter go as she couldn't do anything more in the search than she already did. When the clock hit 10 a.m. the funeral team left with a SWAT team that came to pick them up and take them to Gotham City Chapel, and as this all went on Kendo felt something in the pit of her stomach saying something wrong was going to happen, but she couldn't pinpoint what. With the funeral team, Kirishima leaned against the railing overlooking the crowd of seated people inside the chapel. He looked through the crowd for anyone suspicious but didn't notice anyone of out of the ordinary. He continued to look until his earpiece went off. He quickly answered it. What's up, guy? Tetsu's voice came over the comm link. The outside is clear so far on the north side. The civilians are a bit rowdy but that's about it. What about you guys? Bakugu responded a second later. Nothing over here on the west side either. Just extras being extras. The red-headed teen snickered at his friend's banter with Kodai, Zu, and Shishido and Komori, saying that they didn't have anything of interest happen on their ends as well. The funeral service was going to start soon as the time was nearing 12:14 p.m. The crowd of sorted guests were going to be told to start sitting down and wait for the funeral to start any minute now. From Kirishima's side, the feminine voice of Shinso's partner rang out, "Hey Red Riot, you good over here?" Kirishima turned and greeted the girl with a manly smile. "I'm good, what about you, Kiori?" "What Kiori looks like?" She sighed and leaned on the railing with him. "I've been better. With how late I was awake last night with all the work we had to do, I got little to no sleep. I have no idea how my partner does it." Kirishima nodded to this. From the little interaction he had with the Aizawa look-alike, he could tell the guy had some form of insomnia and just worked through his tiredness, which was pretty manly in its own way. Right then the crowd was settled down and the event started in full swing. The doors opened and the casket was walked into the chapel being held by androids. Kirishima noted this fact but chalked it up to wanting the androids so not to drop the casket accidentally or something, and just watched on at the casket being walked over to the podium in the back of the chapel. The casket was set down, the latch stayed closed not to show the mangled body he knew was under there from the photos they were shown. Kirishima guessed it was for the best as an android playing the part of a kid of the mayor wept for his father. A church bishop approached the podium and started to speak. Kirishima blocked it out as he looked over the crowd, seeing nothing out of the ordinary once again. That was until his earpiece went off. He didn't understand the garbled words and shouts from Tsuyu, but he could tell it wasn't good. He turned to Kiori, who had her walkie-talkie in hand and adjusting the dial until she got to the right frequency. I reaped vehicle inbound. Kirishima's eyes went wide as he turned and ran to the other side of the balcony, letting him see the front door. He was just in time to see a black sedan drive through the open doors, clipping them as it did so, and drove down the center aisle of the seated guest and into the casket, barely missing the bishop, who barely jumped out of the way. Pandemonium ensued quickly after as people shouted, shoved and ran from the sedan. Kirishima didn't hesitate, hopped the railing and landed on the first floor with Kiori following him, and they both made their way through the crowd. The other officers on scene tried to contain the panic, but Kirishima didn't see it working that well. But it didn't bother him as he and Kiori were much more intent on finding out who was driving the sedan and taking them into custody if need be. They finally made it through the crowd to see the sedan's door open, and out walked a man with his hands up, Kiori whipping her pistol out upon seeing him, and she and Kirishima noticed the most concerning part about the man. There was a strange contraption strapped to his neck and the words to the Batman written on his chest, with what they could only assume was vital fluid. The android, who was also holding a phone that was strapped to his hand, pointed to it as he addressed the two. He forced me to do it. He wants to speak to the Batman. Please help me. Oh no. Cursed out Kodai, who just made it on scene with the other heroes not far behind. With Izuku. The Bat computer had an alarm going off that awoke the sleeping young man. Izuku, as drowsy as he was, noticed the alarm and realized what was going on. He rushed out of bed and ran to the computer to see an alert that meant the news had his vigilante alias as a headline. He looked closely on the screen and saw the Gotham City Chapel with police blockading the street and keeping the press and crowd away. Izuku read the headlines about an attack and the attacker calling out the Batman. His eyes narrowed at this as he rushed over to his armor to get dressed. As he did this, however, he spoke to his AI Alfred, compile a detailed report on what's happening at Gotham City Chapel and tell it to me. Of course, sir. Just give me a moment. Sir, the chapel has been attacked and Isba ongoing hostage situation. The hostage apparently drove into the chapel and has a device attached to his neck. The orchestrator of this attack is unknown for now, but from the details I've analyzed, I'd have to point this attack being the work of the Riddler. Izuku mulled this over in his head before agreeing with the Ari's assessment. He finished gearing up by putting his cowl on and turned to walk to his gadget wall. He took the usual gadgets he needed and made sure to take his hacking tool in case he needed to disarm the device mentioned in the report. The Batmobile revved up and flew through the tunnels towards the chapel. 15 minutes later he parked a few streets away before using the rooftops to approach the chapel building, the cloudy sky giving him enough darkness to go unnoticed by most people's eyes. His grapple gun shot into the chapel's tower and he flew through the air and onto ornate architecture. But one lucky photographer who was giving a look around took notice of him and got one lucky shot of Izuku before he disappeared into the chapel. Like this, but without the rain. The photographer lowered his camera and continued to stare at the spot the Batman had been at just seconds before. His partner took notice and nudged him before he asked, "What's up with you, man?" Without speaking or looking away from the spot on the tower, he showed his camera to his partner. The partner looked at him weird before glancing at the camera with the newest picture being shown on it. His eyes widened and he gasped audibly, getting some looks from those nearby. The partner grabbed the camera and turned to his friend. "We gotta send this to the station immediately. We've struck gold." The photographer nodded at his friend after being knocked out of his stupor. He quickly sent the photo, which was soon shown on the Gotham City News channel in a matter of minutes. Izuku entered the chapel and skulked through the shadows of the rafters. He looked down upon the hostage and the hero group up on a balcony overlooking the hostage while talking amongst each other. The Batman took quick notice of the device on the hostage's neck and saw it was a combination lock with welded plating coving the seams, so it probably couldn't be cut through without exploding from a failsafe measure. He narrowed his eyes at this. He also saw the phone in his hand, and Izuku used his hacking device to hack into the phone and track any signal the phone was in contact with. With that done, he deciding to contact Shinso. Using his hacking tool again, he took control of the Perplet's phone and sent a message. Shinso, who was talking with Bakugo and the SWAT team leader on a course of action, stopped speaking as his phone pinged. He raised an eyebrow at this, knowing he had turned his phone to silent, but read the message anyway. Eyes widened as he looked around, getting the others' attention. Bakugo asking, "What's got you spooked, eyebags?" Shinso shot a small glare Bakugo's way before responding, "I got a message from Batman." Bakugo and the other heroes looked at him in surprise, the explosion user being the most vocal. "The hell do you mean you got a message from Batman?" The purple-haired teen sighed, "I mean I got a message from Batman. What else would that mean? Anyways, he says he's here and that the device is mechanical in nature and needs to be manually unlocked to get the hostage out safely using a 3-digit code. So no, we can't have Kirishima or Tetsu. You can't just grab it with your hands and have it explode without the hostage dying." The hardening users blushed sheepishly and rubbed their necks in unison upon hearing their idea get shot down. Bakugo was also pissed and looked around the chapel for the bat but couldn't see him anywhere. "So where is he? We need him to get Blue's Clues to release the hostage." Izuku, who was still in the rafters, sighed at his childhood bully's words. He almost contemplated whether it was better to stay hidden or go and help. Of course he wouldn't leave the hostage, but the thought of frustrating Bakugo to no end was a very appealing thought. But that wasn't like Izuku even in his Batman person, so he slowly approached the group. Dropping from the ceiling using his grappling hook, he landed in front of Shinso and slowly stood up and addressed him, "Detective." Shinso, acting like he didn't just have a mini heart attack, responded in kind, "Batman, it's good to see you again." Izuku nodded before turning and looking at the words written on the hostage's chest. "The Riddler seems to have a fascination with me. This is concerning." "Oi. Extra, listen here, tell us what you." Bakugo started shouting but was cut off by Batman glaring at him and stopping him dead in his tracks. Sweat formed on the blonde teen's face as he withered under the glare, while Kirishima and the rest were shocked by this, but not as shocked as when Batman completely ignored the blonde and started walking towards the railing. He stopped in front of it and looked at the hostage. It had to be the missing district attorney by the facial recognition software in his cowl had deduced. Turning back to group of heroes, 2 detectives, and SWAT team leader, he decided to test them. "Do you know who the hostage's identity?" The heroes shook their heads no, Bakugo even scoffing but not retorting in any way, which was surprising. Shinso, however, answered with a nod, "I believe it's the district attorney that went missing last night. It's safe to assume the Riddler kidnapped him and did the same with the commissioner." Izuku nodded to his reasoning and turned back to the hostage's direction. "I'm going to approach the hostage now. If you want any of your Harding quirk users to come with me, chose quickly." Right after saying this, he hopped the railing and started walking to the district attorney. After landing, he could hear the loud talking back on the balcony, but he didn't care as he had a job to do. When he was almost to the hostage, a slam came from behind him, most likely Kirishima or Tetsu jumping the railing like he did and running towards him. Izuku finally arrived in front of the hostage a minute later and looked him over. While he did this, Kirishima came to his side and huffed as he had ran all the way to him after being thrown off the overlooking balcony by Bakugo. Kirishima addressed the visibly distressed man, "Sir, everything is going to be alright. We'll get you out of this soon." The district attorney scoffed, seemingly already in denial. "I don't think that's the case. This thing is rigged to blow and I don't have much faith in such crooked individuals." He mainly looked at Izuku as he said the last part. Seemed the attorney didn't like those taking up justice into their own hands or going against the law, Izuku noted. Batman used his detective vision on the collar device. Like the attorney had mentioned, it was rigged if it was forcibly opened in any way that wasn't the main unlocking mechanism. He frowned at this but wasn't able to say anything as the phone in the attorney's hand started ringing, with the ID of the caller being the Riddler. Izuku touched his gauntlet to see his hacking tool working on configuring the other caller. With that, he grabbed the arm of the man and brought the phone to him before answering. The phone screen shifted and the image of a background with question marks painted was shown. Then a second later the Riddler was revealed in all his glory. The Riddler, but with a dilapidated wall behind him with question marks painted on it. The leather-masked man looked at the Batman and spoke in a cheery yet obviously modulated voice. "Ah, goody. We finally meet. As you can see, we are being live-streamed to all of Gotham City. Izuku didn't respond to this, trying to mentally note every feature of the man he could see so he could try and find out his identity, but it seemed the Riddler noticed this. "Don't try figuring out who I am just yet, Batman. I have the mask and modulator for a reason. If I wanted to be found out so soon, I'd go around with my name written on my mask." The armored vigilante didn't respond, and instead Kirishima spoke to the villain. "What do you want, and how do we get the district attorney out of your trap?" The Riddler's eyes shifted to the red head before going back to the Batman. "I wanted you, Batman, not some spandex-wearing simpleton. Have him take a step back and I will talk." Kirishima wanted to protest this, but with a look from Izuku, the red head shrunk in on himself, took a few steps back and away from the hostage like ordered. Turning back to the phone, Izuku finally spoke. "We've done as asked. Now tell us how we disarm the collar Riddler." Riddler laughed at this before explaining, "That's simple. When I grew up I loved riddles. I used to read and answer them every day with my mother before she passed away. So I want to share that little bit of happiness with you, and I want Mr. West here to answer with your help. For each riddle solved I'll give you a number to the combination lock. So are you ready to play a game, Batman?" Izuku pondered the possible outcomes of this. Most outcomes were bad, but he knew he wasn't in control of the situation. He had no choice but to play the Riddler's game and hopefully get out of it in one piece with the hostage alive. "Fine. We'll play your game," Izuku answered after a good few silent seconds. District Attorney Adam West looked horrified but soon also seemed to come to the same conclusion as Izuku. He reluctantly agreed and the collar beeped, indicating the game started with the timer counting down from 2 minutes. First riddle, ladies and gentlemen. It can be cruel, poetic, or blind. But when it's denied, it's violence you may find. "What am I?" the Riddler asked with a maniacal look in his eyes. Mr. West panicked and sputtered, "I don't know." But Izuku answered for him, "Justice. The answer is justice." The attorney copied that answer and the Riddler laughed. "That's correct. The first digit of the code is now on screen. Now for my next riddle. If you are justice, do not lie. What is the price of your blind eye?" Izuku turned the lock to the first digit and pondered the riddle while doing so. The attorney didn't get it, but Izuku did. "Bribes. He's asking how much for you to overrule a case for someone." The district attorney paled at this. I can't say that." "You have to, so unless you want to die, answer truthfully," Izuku said, giving the attorney a glare that made the robot visibly shiver under the intense gaze. "It's around 20,000, maybe more if it's a high-class client and I know they have the cash." Izuku glared harder at the attorney for his corrupt nature and his earlier judgmental remark regarding him when it was he who was the corrupt one. The Riddler clapped in apparent joy. "That's what I wanted to hear. As you can see, Gotham City, the ones you trust to uphold justice, is just as corrupt as the trash in our streets, so how can we trust them when they can turn a blind eye to us, to the people who suffer daily?" Izuku looked to the timer and saw 30 seconds left. He then discreetly looked at the progress of the tracker of Riddler's IP. It was almost finished at 96%, so with a tense look he turned to the Riddler. "What's the next riddle? We're running out of time." Riddler shook his head before stopping and looking Izuku straight in the eyes. "Fine. The last riddle is this. Who is the Batman?" The district attorney and all those watching were shocked at this turn, but none more than Izuku. This wasn't one of the possibilities he thought of going into this situation, and this wasn't something he was ready to reveal just yet either. The attorney looked up at Izuku and grabbed him roughly. Tell me who you are quickly." Panicking for a moment, Izuku started to answer, "I'm I." He was too late as the Riddler spoke condescendingly. "Oh, and we're out of time. Too bad. This is goodbye, Batman. It was fun while it lasted." Ka-boom. Izuku was sent flying, his mind going blank as the heat and shockwave hit him directly. He just barely had enough time to cover his face before the explosion went off. When he hit the ground he skidded and rolled onto his back, but right before losing consciousness he saw the blurring figures of the heroes and Shinso running over to him. Then, it all went black. So, this was the end of part 2 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.